The rain in Portland often feels less like a downpour and more like a permanent shimmering veil, a constant murmur against the window panes. I liked it. The ceaseless drumming was a natural rhythm for my thoughts, often a frantic echo chamber, but sometimes a comforting blanket. My name is Alara Thorne, and at 28, I'd learned to find solace in consistency, in predictable patterns, in the quiet hum of my own careful existence. I worked as a freelance data analyst, my days spent untangling complex spreadsheets, finding the hidden threads of information that most people overlooked. It was a job that perfectly suited my key traits. I was patient, analytical, and unyielding. Each trait a quiet promise of who I was and who I was destined to become. Years ago, these traits had been my shield and then paradoxically my greatest vulnerability. I had poured my soul into a collaborative project at my first real tech job, back when I was a wide-eyed 22-year-old eager to prove myself. Marcus Albright, my senior colleague, had been charming, charismatic, and utterly devoid of actual talent or work ethic. He'd shirked responsibility at every turn, disappearing from meetings, delivering sloppy work, and leaving me to pick up the pieces, polish them, and then present them. And he always took the credit. Every success, every breakthrough, every late night I pulled became another feather in his cap, another rung on his ladder to executive stardom. When I finally found the courage to speak up to present the meticulous documentation I'd compiled, my concerns were dismissed. Marcus, it seemed, was already too entrenched, too beloved, too valuable to the company's image. I was young, easily replaced, and ultimately professionally sabotaged. The experience left a scar, a deep, festering wound that never quite healed. I moved to Portland, starting fresh, but the sting of injustice, the memory of my dignity stripped away, remained a low, persistent thrum beneath the surface of my new life. It was a motivation, a silent vow I'd made to myself. Someday, somehow, the universe would balance the scales. My everyday routine, a carefully constructed fortress against past pain, involved coffee shops, quiet libraries, and the occasional visit to the nearby university campus. I liked the buzz of young minds, the raw ambition that reminded me of myself years ago. It was during one of these visits, during a particularly heavy Portland downpour, that I stumbled upon a scene that would reignite a fire I thought I had long since banked. I was nursing a lukewarm latte in a campus coffee shop, ostensibly working on a client's database but truly just enjoying the ambient chatter. Across the room, a young man, probably a student, was hunched over a laptop, his face a mask of frustration. I recognized the frantic energy. It was the look of someone against a deadline, battling not just the work but an external force. He was muttering to himself, typing furiously, then stopping to stare at his phone. I overheard snippets of his whispered complaints. He didn't answer again. I followed up 3 times, nothing. A familiar chill traced its way down my spine. The words were too close to my own past, an unsettling echo. My analytical mind, ever tuned to patterns, immediately picked up on the common thread. This student was clearly dealing with an absent partner on a group project, a partner who was shirking responsibility. I found myself subtly shifting in my seat, my eyes drawn to the unfolding drama. I saw him send another text, then another, his thumb hovering over the send button as if willing a response. No reply came. His shoulders slumped, a picture of defeat for days. I saw him there at the same table, the same coffee shop. He was always alone, always working, a single-minded dedication etched into his weary features. I watched him build out presentations, scribble notes into a thick textbook, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was doing all the work clearly, just as I had done all those years ago. He was the one digging through dusty academic papers, the one grappling with complex theories, the one pulling the all-nighters. And I knew, with a certainty that was both chilling and exhilarating, that someone else would likely try to claim credit for it. It was the injustice I knew intimately, playing out before my very eyes. My patience, a trait I usually valued, was tested as I watched the student's silent struggle, waiting for the inevitable moment of betrayal. Then came the night before the deadline. The coffee shop was almost empty, the rain outside relentless. The student was still there, his laptop screen glowing against his tired face. I saw him open a document, likely the final project. He scrolled through it, his eyes scanning the pages, his fingers tapping restlessly on the keyboard. Then he paused, his gaze fixed on the title page. I saw a name there alongside his own, and then with a slow, deliberate movement, his finger hovered over the delete key. My breath hitched. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was wrestling with the ethical dilemma, the silent battle between fairness and academic procedure. He was acknowledging the truth that his absent partner had contributed nothing and therefore deserved nothing. And then he deleted the name, just like that, one simple action born of pure distilled frustration and a deep sense of injustice. He submitted the file, closed his laptop with a quiet click, and walked out into the Portland rain, a solitary figure finally unburdened. A surge of something powerful, raw, and undeniably vindicating shot through me. It wasn't anger, not exactly. It was a potent mix of recognition and reignition. Witnessing that student's quiet act of self-preservation, of drawing a line in the sand, served as a catalyst. It was a flicker in the darkness, a promise that those who shirked responsibility could face consequences, even if it was a small academic comeuppance. The student had stopped waiting for fairness, he had taken it. And in that moment, my own long-simmering desire to expose Marcus Albright, to meticulously peel back the layers of his established pattern of deceit and irresponsibility, reignited with an intensity that surprised even me. The thought pulsed in my mind, an unyielding beat. He had plenty of chances. I just stopped waiting. The question that now burned, a silent promise to myself, was how I, the patient orchestrator, would bring about Marcus Albright's larger reckoning years after he had stolen my dreams. How would I ensure he paid for every single one of his unearned successes? Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. My life in Portland, once meticulously ordered and focused on my current projects, began to subtly shift its axis. The student's quiet rebellion had sparked something deep within me, an unyielding need for my own form of justice. Marcus Albright, the man who had stolen my professional future and taken credit for my painstaking work, had faded into the background of my memory, a painful echo I tried to ignore. But now he was front and center, a target illuminated by the harsh glare of my rekindled motivation. My first step, as always, was analytical. I needed data. What was Marcus doing now? Was he still in the industry, still charming his way to the top? The thought filled me with a cold dread, the kind that settles deep in your bones. I opened my laptop, the cool metal of familiar comfort, and began to search. LinkedIn, industry news sites, corporate press releases. I typed his name, Marcus Albright, into the search bar, my fingers hovering for a moment before hitting enter. The results populated quickly. My eyes scanned the screen and my stomach dropped. He was thriving. More than thriving, he was soaring. Marcus Albright, the same man who couldn't be bothered to show up for meetings or write a single line of code without me editing it, was now a senior director of product development at a burgeoning tech firm, InnovateCore Solutions, based just outside Portland. My jaw clenched. InnovateCore was a no-name, respected, growing rapidly. The sheer audacity of his success, knowing the foundation it was built upon, sent a wave of nausea through me. He was listed as a key player in multiple successful product launches, lauded for his visionary leadership and strategic foresight. The very terms that had once been applied to my work before he had absorbed them into his own narrative. A consuming anger began to bubble, hot and acrid, in the pit of my stomach. It wasn't a wild, uncontrollable rage, but a cold, precise fury. This was more than just a personal slight, it was a systemic injustice. Marcus wasn't an anomaly, he was a symptom. He represented every person who ever shirked responsibility, who relied on the genuine efforts of others and then stepped into the spotlight claiming victory. My patient nature, usually a steadying force, now felt like a taut string stretched to its absolute limit, ready to snap. I spent weeks in a quiet, almost obsessive, dive into Marcus's professional life. My analytical skills, honed over years of complex data mining, were put to their ultimate test. I didn't just look at his LinkedIn profile, I cross-referenced it with company announcements, archived news articles, even cached versions of old project pages. I was looking for patterns, for the subtle tells of his old habits, and I found them. His pattern was clear, depressingly so. Every successful project he was credited with had a common thread. A brilliant, often junior team member mentioned fleetingly in the footnotes, or a complex technical challenge that, according to industry chatter, had been mysteriously overcome without clear explanation. He'd always swoop in at the end, taking the bow, speaking eloquently about the we while truly meaning me. It was a masterclass in professional camouflage. He was still the same man, just operating on a larger, more sophisticated stage. The promise of value for me, the drive for vindication, intensified with every new discovery. I started observing InnovateCore's public events, industry conferences, open house days, even charity galas listed on their corporate social responsibility pages. I didn't want to get close, not yet. My role was still that of the patient orchestrator, gathering intelligence from a distance, understanding the terrain before I dared to step onto the battlefield. I noted the way he interacted with his team, the casual dismissiveness he directed at subordinates, the fawning attention he showered on executives. He was a chameleon, adapting his persona to suit his audience, always looking for the next opportunity to climb. One day, I decided to take a bolder step. I wanted to understand the internal dynamics of InnovateCore. I knew that Marcus, like any fraud, would leave a trail of disgruntled former employees in his wake. People who had been wronged just as I had been. My analytical mind considered the best approach. Anonymous forums, industry gossip sites. I spent days sifting through old Glassdoor reviews, checking for specific keywords, cross-referencing dates with Marcus's tenure. It was a slow, painstaking process. Then I found her. A former InnovateCore employee, Sarah Jenkins, had posted a scathing review years ago detailing a project where her contributions had been systematically minimized, her ideas stolen, and her hard work attributed to a senior director who had barely lifted a finger. The review perfectly mirrored my own experience. My heart hammered in my chest. This was it, a direct hit, a clear validation of his pattern. But there was no contact information, just an anonymous post from years past. The next few weeks were a blur of digital detective work. Using fragments of information from Sarah's old social media profiles, archived professional networks, and even obscure university alumni pages, I began to piece together her current life. It felt invasive, morally ambiguous, but my unyielding resolve was absolute. This wasn't about petty revenge. It was about exposing a predator who had built a career on the backs of others, a predator who was likely continuing his destructive behavior. My motivation had deepened. It was no longer just about me, but about protecting others from his deceit. I found Sarah. She was no longer in the tech industry, having seemingly abandoned it after her negative experience. She worked as a freelance graphic designer, her portfolio vibrant and full of creativity, a stark contrast to the corporate world she had left behind. Finding her contact information was the easy part. The hard part was deciding how to approach her. What could I say? Hi, I'm Alara, and a man named Marcus Albright ruined both our lives. Want to team up for revenge? It sounded insane. I drafted dozens of emails, each one more formal, more detached, trying to mask the burning fury within me. I highlighted shared experiences but kept it vague enough not to sound like a stalker. I talked about patterns of behavior, about professional ethics, about a desire for accountability. I explained that I was simply looking for a deeper understanding of a particular individual's professional conduct. It was a gamble, a test of my patience. Days turned into a week. No reply. My hopes, which had soared, crashed back down to earth. This was harder than I thought. People move on, they bury the past. They don't want to dredge up old trauma, especially if it means facing a powerful individual. The thought of giving up flickered, a tempting, dangerous whisper in my mind. What if I was wrong? What if I was just a bitter former employee clinging to an old slight? My emotional toll was growing. I found myself staring blankly at my computer screen for hours, the lines of code and data blurring before my eyes. My sleep became restless, haunted by the specter of Marcus's unearned success. This was my rock bottom, a moment of profound desolation and helplessness. The unfairness of it all, the sheer injustice, threatened to overwhelm me. Was it truly impossible to fight such a deeply entrenched system? Was I merely becoming obsessed, losing myself in the pursuit of a past grievance? Just as I was about to delete Sarah's contact from my system to let the fire of my motivation slowly die out once more, an email popped into my inbox. The subject line was simply, "Ray, your message." My heart leaped. It was Sarah. Her reply was cautious, wary. She acknowledged my indirect reference to Marcus Albright, her words tinged with a weariness I knew all too well. She asked for more details, a careful probe into my intentions. This was my chance. I responded with brutal honesty, but framed in a way that appealed to her own sense of justice, not just my need for revenge. I detailed my experience with Marcus, the stolen work, the dismissive superiors. I explained how witnessing the academic comeuppance of a student on campus had reignited my own dormant desire for accountability. I spoke not of revenge, but of exposure. Of peeling back the layers of a pattern of deceit that had clearly continued, impacting not just me but others like her. I shared my theory that Marcus was an architect of professional fraud, not a visionary, and that his continued success was a threat to true innovation and merit. I promised her anonymity and safety, leveraging my analytical skills to propose a strategy that minimized her risk. I knew with an unyielding certainty that if I could show her the depth of his continued deception, she would see the value in exposing him. Sarah agreed to a discreet video call. She was guarded at first, her eyes wary. But as I laid out the evidence I'd meticulously gathered, the patterns of his promotions, the vague descriptions of his contributions to public projects, the whispers in industry forums about projects where he seemed to disappear until the glory phase, I saw a shift in her demeanor. Her initial wariness transformed into a simmering anger, a recognition of the same injustice she had endured. She confirmed my suspicions, adding details from her own experience, stories of Marcus claiming her concepts as his own, of him subtly sabotaging her reputation when she pushed back. We talked for hours, old wounds reopening, then slowly, carefully beginning to knit together with a shared purpose. It's not just us, Alara, she said, her voice tight with emotion. He's been doing this for years. He always finds someone else's brilliance to siphon off. Her words solidified my resolve. This wasn't just about my past, it was about a pattern, a systemic issue. This was about finally making Marcus Albright face the true consequences of his deceit and hopefully preventing him from doing it to anyone else. We began to brainstorm, two patient, analytical women, fueled by an unyielding desire for justice, carefully sketching out the bones of a meticulous plan. The road ahead would be long, fraught with risk, but for the first time in years, I felt a surge of hope, a powerful sense of agency. The struggle was far from over, but the tides I felt were slowly, irrevocably turning. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily. The low point, that moment of despair where I almost let Marcus Albright's unearned success defeat me, had been a necessary crucible. It had stripped away any lingering doubts, any moral qualms about the path I was embarking on. My transformation from a passive victim to the patient orchestrator was complete. Sarah Jenkins, once a wary stranger, had become an unexpected ally, her own bitter experiences with Marcus providing invaluable insight and reinforcing my unyielding resolve. We were two fragments of a larger pattern, converging to expose the source. Our initial conversations were tentative, cautious, like two spies testing the waters of a clandestine operation. But as we shared our stories, piecing together Marcus's modus operandi, a powerful synergy emerged. My analytical mind, with its penchant for data and systems, complemented Sarah's lived experience and artistic intuition. She described his charming facade, his uncanny ability to deflect blame, his masterful talent for making others feel beholden to him even as he exploited them. I in turn detailed his digital footprint, the subtle inconsistencies in his public narrative, the telltale signs of a man who coasted on the brilliance of others. The plan began to take shape, meticulously crafted, piece by agonizing piece. It wasn't about a single grand gesture, but a series of precise, surgical strikes designed to dismantle his carefully constructed public image. My patient nature was paramount here. We couldn't rush. Every step had to be carefully considered, every contingency planned for. Marcus Albright had built a career on deceit. We would build his downfall on undeniable truth, layered with irrefutable evidence. Our first objective was to gather current, tangible evidence of his ongoing pattern of shirked responsibility and credit theft within InnovateCore. This was the riskiest part. We couldn't infiltrate the company directly, but my analytical mind found a workaround. InnovateCore, like many tech companies, regularly hosted webinars, industry roundtables, and online Q&A sessions to promote their latest products and innovations. Marcus, naturally, was often a featured speaker. He always does this, Sarah explained during one of our late-night video calls, her voice a low murmur against the hum of her computer fan. He'll present the concept, the high-level vision, but if anyone asks a technical question, he'll deflect. Oh, my brilliant team handles the granular details, or we're still refining that, but the core innovation is what matters. This was our opening. We started meticulously recording and transcribing every public appearance Marcus made. I used advanced speech-to-text software, cross-referencing his statements with official InnovateCore documentation. My goal was to identify specific projects he claimed credit for, then seek out the actual technical leads or junior engineers mentioned in passing. It was like searching for a needle in a digital haystack, but my unyielding focus never wavered. Sarah, with her graphic design expertise, became our visual archivist. She created intricate flowcharts of Marcus's career progression, highlighting his uncanny ability to jump from one successful project to the next, often leaving a trail of quiet departures from the true innovators. We built a timeline charting his promotions against the company's product launch successes, noting the names of the unsung heroes who truly drove those innovations. The visual representation made his pattern shockingly clear. One breakthrough came when I discovered a former InnovateCore junior developer, a young woman named Maya Sharma who had recently left the company. Her LinkedIn profile mentioned a specific highly technical feature of InnovateCore's flagship product, a feature Marcus often boasted about in his presentations. Yet Maya's profile detailed her role as the lead architect of that very feature. This was a critical piece of the puzzle. I approached Maya with the same careful, empathetic strategy I'd used with Sarah, focusing on systemic injustice, not just personal vendetta. Maya, burned out and disillusioned by her experience at InnovateCore, was initially hesitant, but my detailed explanation of Marcus's pattern, backed by concrete evidence, resonated deeply with her. She shared screenshots of emails, internal project documents, and even Slack messages that clearly showed Marcus's minimal involvement in her project, despite his public claims. The evidence was damning. He had swooped in just before launch, taken all the credit, and sidelined her. Maya agreed to lend her voice anonymously at first to our growing dossier of truth. The dossier became our masterpiece. It wasn't a mere collection of grievances. It was a forensic analysis of Marcus Albright's career. Each page was a chapter in his deceit, my story, Sarah's story, Maya's story, and countless other subtle pieces of evidence gleaned from public records and whispered industry gossip. We included audio excerpts of his public deflections, side-by-side comparisons of his vague contributions versus the detailed work of his teams, and annotated timelines showing his masterful credit theft. My analytical mind thrived on this complexity, finding perverse satisfaction in meticulously documenting his downfall. The challenge now was how to deliver this information. A direct approach to InnovateCore's HR or ethics department was too risky. Marcus was too well-connected, too skilled at deflecting. We needed a public forum, one that couldn't be easily dismissed or buried. A place where his reputation, the very thing he cherished most, would be irrevocably shattered. My initial idea was an anonymous whistleblower site, but Sarah argued against it. He's too good at charming his way out of things, Alara. He'll spin it as disgruntled employees, a smear campaign. We need something that forces him to confront the truth, something he can't lie his way out of. We needed to create a scenario where his lies would be exposed in real time under pressure. The idea, when it finally solidified, was audacious, risky, and perfectly aligned with my unyielding desire for a grand public reckoning. InnovateCore was a prominent sponsor of the annual Innovation Summit in Portland, a prestigious industry event where Marcus was scheduled to deliver the keynote address, a speech titled The Future of Innovation, Vision and Execution. The irony was almost too much to bear. Our plan during the Q&A session after his keynote, we would subtly yet strategically expose his pattern. We couldn't do it directly, that would be dismissed as a personal attack. Instead, we would use the questions themselves as a lever. The day of the summit dawned, gray and misty, just as I liked it. My heart hammered, a frantic drumbeat against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I was Alara Thorne, the patient orchestrator, and this was my moment. Sarah, Maya, and I were scattered throughout the auditorium, inconspicuous members of the audience. We had developed a set of carefully crafted questions designed to pinpoint the specific projects where Marcus had stolen credit, framed as innocent inquiries about team dynamics or overcoming technical challenges. Each question was a subtle accusation, a tiny needle designed to prick his inflated ego. Marcus, radiant in a tailored suit, strode onto the stage, soaking in the applause. He began his keynote, his voice smooth and confident, filled with buzzwords and grand pronouncements. He spoke of his vision, his leadership, his unique ability to foster innovation. Each word felt like a fresh cut, but I remained calm, my patient nature a fortress against the rising bile in my throat. I knew this was the calm before the storm. This was the final progression of our promise. When the Q&A session began, a ripple of excitement went through the room. A hand shot up in the third row. It was Maya. Mr. Albright, she began, her voice clear and steady, you spoke extensively about the revolutionary Nexus protocol in your product. Could you elaborate on the specific technical challenges your team faced in developing its unique data encryption and your direct involvement in resolving those very complex algorithms? A flicker of surprise crossed Marcus's face. He smiled, a practiced, deflective smile. Ah, the Nexus protocol. A triumph of collaborative genius. My role, of course, was to provide the strategic oversight to ensure the vision was maintained. The specifics, the brilliant engineers like Maya here, they handled the granular details. He nodded vaguely in Maya's direction, subtly dismissive. My turn came next. I stood, my voice calm, almost detached. Mr. Albright, your career progression at InnovateCore has been remarkable. Many of your team members have, however, moved on to other ventures. How do you ensure continuity of innovation when key technical talent, like Sarah Jenkins, who contributed so significantly to the Aurora project, depart? What measures do you personally take to retain the actual creators of these groundbreaking technologies? This time, Marcus faltered slightly. The mention of Sarah's name, specifically tied to a project he constantly touted as his own brainchild, visibly unnerved him. He rambled about talent management and corporate responsibility, but his words lacked their usual conviction. The audience, attuned to the nuances of corporate doublespeak, seemed to sense a shift. A subtle murmur began to spread. Then Sarah, from her seat in the back, delivered the final, devastating question. Mr. Albright, with respect to the Pioneer Initiative, which you highlighted as a personal passion project, the initial concept designs, as presented at an internal company review 3 years ago, bore a striking resemblance to some uncredited intellectual property. Can you clarify how you ensured all original contributions were properly attributed, especially from junior colleagues who might have felt intimidated? The temperature in the room dropped. The question wasn't just pointed, it carried an undertone of accusation and implication of plagiarism. Marcus, for the first time, lost his composure, his face flushed. He stammered, his polished facade cracking. He looked from Sarah to me, then back to Maya, a dawning horror in his eyes. He saw the threads, the undeniable pattern we had so meticulously woven. The questions weren't random, they were surgically precise. Suddenly, a large screen behind Marcus, previously displaying his slides, flickered. My signal, with a quiet command from my tablet linked to a discrete projector I'd rented and integrated into the summit's AV system with a cunning social engineering ploy, the screen behind him transformed. It displayed the first slide of our dossier, a side-by-side comparison. On one side, a quote from Marcus's current keynote. On the other, an internal memo from years ago authored by Maya outlining the exact same technical solution he was now claiming as his vision. Then another slide flashed, showing Sarah's original conceptual artwork for the Aurora project, juxtaposed with a polished version Marcus had presented, claiming it as his own. The slides weren't accusatory, they were simply factual, irrefutable evidence. The proof was in the dates, the file metadata, the internal email trails. A gasp rippled through the audience. The murmurs grew louder, turning into an undeniable buzz. People were pulling out their phones, taking pictures of the damning slides. Marcus's face turned ashen. He tried to speak, but no words came. His carefully constructed empire of lies was crumbling, exposed in the harsh light of undeniable truth. The grand payoff, years in the making, was finally here. The consequences were immediate and brutal. The summit organizers, alerted to the scandalous display, quickly cut the feed, but it was too late. The images, the implications, had already gone viral. Social media exploded with screenshots and comments. InnovateCore's stock took a nosedive. An internal investigation was launched within hours, fueled by the mounting public outcry and the flood of new whistleblower tips that came pouring in. More former colleagues, emboldened by our actions, coming forward with their own stories of Marcus's deceit. Within a week, Marcus Albright was fired from InnovateCore Solutions, his professional reputation utterly annihilated. Board released a terse statement about unforeseen internal misconduct, but the message was clear. He lost his lucrative golden parachute, his stock options, and his standing in the industry. The man who had built a career on taking credit from others now had nothing to claim but the wreckage of his own making. My emotional state was a complex tapestry. There was triumph, certainly. A deep, abiding satisfaction in witnessing his public downfall, a vindication that resonated to my very core. The unyielding drive for justice had been met and the scales finally felt balanced. But there was also a bittersweet taste. The years of quiet suffering, the professional setbacks, the constant shadow of injustice, they didn't simply vanish. The victory was immense, but it didn't erase the past. It merely closed a painful chapter. Sarah and Maya reached out, their voices filled with gratitude and a shared sense of liberation. We had achieved something together, a collective act of retribution that benefited not just us, but countless others who had suffered in silence. Our actions had not only brought Marcus Albright to justice, but had also sent a ripple through the industry, a subtle warning that chronic credit stealers and responsibility shirkers could no longer hide in the shadows. The most surprising twist came a few months later. A prominent venture capital firm, impressed by the meticulous analysis and strategic thinking evident in the public fallout of the Marcus Albright scandal, contacted me. They were looking for a head of due diligence, someone with an analytical and unyielding approach to vetting potential investments, ensuring ethical leadership and true innovation. They wanted someone who could spot a fraud from a mile away. It was an ironic, yet perfect culmination of my journey. My expertise, honed by a quest for revenge, had become my greatest professional asset. I had not just reclaimed my dignity, I had redefined my purpose. Life in Portland continued, the rain still a constant companion, but now it felt different. It no longer muffled the echoes of my past, instead it washed them clean, leaving behind a profound sense of peace. The patient orchestrator had brought about a larger reckoning, not just for herself, but for the principle of fairness. And as I looked out at the shimmering city, I knew my story. A tale of quiet suffering, unyielding resolve, and ultimate vindication was now complete. Subscribe to Tales of Revenge channel for new revenge stories daily.